Live from San Jose, California, in the heart of Silicon Valley, it's theCUBE, covering Hadoop Summit 2016. Brought to you by Hortonworks. Here's your host, George Gilbert.
Welcome back to theCUBE. My name's George Gilbert. We're here at Hadoop Summit in the San Jose Convention Center, and we're here with Sri Raghavan, distinguished guest from Teradata, and actually fresh off a Teradata Influencer Summit a couple weeks ago.
That's correct.
So Sri, couple things to talk about. Teradata we've known for having the best decision support database, big iron, flex the performance muscles. They're changing their stripes. Tell us how.
First of all, George, thanks for having me here and Teradata here. We're very happy to be here. We have a lot of respect for Wikibon and theCUBE. So it's great to be back here with other people having participated in various parts of it. So, Teradata has, of course, as you mentioned, we've been in business for 30 years and we started off doing a lot of work around the enterprise data warehouse. We've actually had a very substantial big data solutions as well as practice for the past 5+ years. So we've been very active, we've been putting out solutions, we've got a lot of customers who have purchased our big data solutions. In particular, the one that I'm representing today in the company is this one called the Aster Analytics Solutions. It's what we call the multi-genre advanced analytics solution. And it is something we're very proud of, and we've had a lot of customers, and so that has been central to the big data story that we've been telling, we've been trying to tell, and we've been very successful with it. So
that was, Aster became part of Teradata's pivot to big data when you did the acquisition, which was what year?
The acquisition was in 2011, so it's roughly going on about 5 years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, everyone's talking about now analytics, predictive analytics, machine learning.
Yep.
What's Teradata saying to its customers and its prospects about how it can help them on that journey?
Yeah. So typically, whenever we start having these conversations with prospects and customers, the question has never been about technology. We never approach it from the standpoint of, hey, look, we have this great technology called Aster, and we've got this integration with Hadoop, and we've got machine learning, graph, and text, and sentiment, and what have you. We typically try to approach it from the standpoint of, hey, let's first try to figure out what business problems a particular customer or an organization has. So it's the conversations, the vernacular has always been in that vein. And our goal is to provide, to be the best advisors that we possibly can be to the customers towards resolving these kinds of questions. So let me give you an example, right? A couple of years ago, one of our big customers today, they had the first question they had was around, hey, a lot of our customers are churning. This was a big bank. And so, but they couldn't quite figure out what the rationale was behind all this churn that was occurring. And so the kinds of questions that we asked them was more around, okay, what are the different kinds of channels that you have through which your customers interact with you? And they came back and said, well, we have people who come directly to our branches. We have people who actually come and engage with us through the web, through our substantive and substantial digital presence. They also talked about how people call up their call centers and talk to them and all that. So we looked at, these are completely disparate sources of data that come through these channels. And the idea is, we started looking at the various paths that people take when they interact with the bank through these channels. And we did a path analysis. We have our own patented pathing algorithm called NPath, which we applied to this issue to be able to determine, hey, what are some of the antecedent conditions to churn? Okay. What are the 4 or 5 things that people do before they throw in their hat and say, look, I don't want to be a part of your bank anymore. So for us to be able to understand that there was a churn problem was very important, which then subsequently gave birth to a number of business questions. For churn to occur, people must be interacting with you. Okay, if they interact with you, how do they interact with you? what are the different frequencies with which they interact? So then we start asking questions about where's the data located? What does the data look like? Are they all the same data? How do we bring them together? Then that's when we start bringing the technology piece into it. So to answer your question in a fairly elliptical manner, it's about the business problem. Then we focus on the process, and then it's only then do we care about the technology and bring that in.
So, how long did this engagement take, and sort of what technologies did you have to bring to bear?
Yeah.
And who ultimately was the customer?
Right. So the question in terms of how quickly we were able to do it, and of course one of the first unsatisfactory answers is that of course it depends on the use case, but typically we've been able to resolve these things sometimes from a matter of hours to typically 1 or 2 days, where we're able to show some material difference between the pre-solution days where we went in and explained our solution to where we are today. So that the amount of time spent is very short. Of course, there are many other use cases that get built on top of that, and that extends engagement quite a bit and all that, right? So typically, on average, it's a matter of days before we show very, very good progress. Now, the question as to who typically consumes it, and again, this is where it goes back to the whole point of leading with a business question, because typically a lot of these questions are asked by the business. I mean, most of the time, in the past, when the conversations happen around big data technologies, it's always how do we talk to the IT about delivering the solution. But as I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir, and you've seen it yourself, a lot of these conversations are generated. They've begun with the business side of the organization. Guys who are responsible for customer satisfaction, or people who are responsible for getting customer retention, or to increase new members. When I used to work as part of JP Morgan Chase back in the day, one of my areas of responsibility was new customer acquisition. As a person who was responsible for delivering insights into customer acquisitions, it was my job to be able to recommend to the business, hey, these are the 4 or 5 strategies that we are able to recommend based on the insights we got from the analytics.
In the case of JP Morgan, you might not have had that technology to bring to bear,
yes.
But you would have had a path, a favored or an optimized path, I assume. Take us back to this bank. Where did you find the breakdowns where they were experiencing events that led to churn?
Yeah, and that the answer to this question is never obvious up front, right? Because all you do know is, as a point of visibility, the only thing that is at least intuitively available to you to look at is the fact that somebody walks into your bank and says, hey, I'd like to close my accounts with you today. So typically, that is your first view into the extent to which the customer has been affected by your services or the lack thereof. Now, of course, there are many other way stations that the customer has passed with you in their interactions with you. So it could be that potentially they've come back at some point in time prior to that moment and said, look, I really am very upset with the fact that you charged me $30 for this check which got bounced, and I have $10,000 in my savings account. You can't really do this. It's terrible and all that, right? So having said that, then what they realize is, look, I know today has been the culmination of a lot of events. So that's when you start looking at what are those 4 or 5 events that have occurred. And that's when you start looking at, we have, let's say, 5 million customers. Now, obviously, every customer has a certain path. Everybody's idiosyncratic in terms of how they interact with any given institution. But what we look at is, among the 5 million customers, is there any chance for you to be able to crystallize 5 paths that, it's a standard 80-20 Pareto rule kind of thing, right? Where, look, 5 paths account for 80% of the churn customers, meaning that there are 6 or 7 things that happen in these 5 paths. Every time we need to consider when a new customer starts going on that path, then we start flagging them and go on. Here's the other thing that's important what the bank did, and I'll let you ask the question, but this is an important point. Not every customer needs to be given the same level of service, right? And the bank, sometimes, the bank comes and tells us, look, we realize you're upset as a customer. We get it, right? But then you also have to be realistic. You are very upset with us, but you have $5 in your checking account. You overdraw your account maybe 15 times a year, and you don't really keep any substantive amount of balance. So really, the fact that you're upset with us really bothers us, but frankly, it is not worth our while to make you happy because other things like, okay, what's a lifetime value of this customer?
Right.
So these are some of the things you do to be able to deliver proper value to the company, and we do a lot of that.
Okay. And now you have a much broader range of tools. It's not just raw database.
Correct.
It's the consulting and analytics to bring these increasingly repeatable solutions
Absolutely.
to bear. Okay.
So one of the, you ask a very important line of business manager to be able to develop certain decisions based on the data that she is able to see.
Right.
I need the head of insights to also do the same thing. I need the CEO of the corporation. Now, how do you do that? Well, one of the ways by which you do that is to provide a solution where you're not restricted by your knowledge or no knowledge of being able to code in, let's say, Java, Perl, C++, Python, and so on, right? So the deal here is for you to be able to say, okay, as a company, are we providing certain apps that people with good visual interfaces that you can click and paste, or rather which you can drag and drop to be able to get to, being able to execute certain analytics which run in the back end. And so that's exactly the trajectory that we've taken as a company, to provide solutions where you have the ability to be able to implement them without knowing what the inner plumbing looks like.
Okay.
That's a holy grail for us.
So let's leave it at that point as part one, and we will pick that thread up in a part two interview at our next show. But it's a much more solutions-oriented message, obviously, with Teradata no longer being a database supplier but a trusted advisor, and sounds really intriguing to get one level more. All right, this is George Gilbert. We're at the Hadoop Summit 2016, San Jose Convention Center, and we'll be right back after this. Thanks.